Good morning, lovely ladies. I am super excited to be here today with our live expert series with Ann Kaplan. And Ann is a doula and also a parenting coach, which I think is a awesome combination, Ann. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got into both of those and combined those?
So yes, I started my practice just doing birth work. I was a doula and I started teaching childbirth classes. And as my practice grew and as my own children grew, I have 4 kids of my own. People just kind of, it sort of organically kind of happened because people started asking me questions about way more stuff than just childbirth. And I was tackling things with my own kids and doing my own research and things like that. And just my practice just really organically grew to be mostly at this point about supporting moms after they've had kids. So most of my clients reach out to me in like toddler time or like early childhood with behavior stuff. Although today I'm really excited because I'm going to be talking about teenagers in my Facebook group. So I love when people ask me about teenagers because I don't get to talk about them very much, and I have several of them now. And I find that age challenging and fascinating at the same time. So I like to joke that I support people wherever they are in their mothering journey from conception to college.
Awesome. Well, then I'm definitely going to have to ask you some questions about teenagers because I've got a couple of those too. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I went to your website and I downloaded your free guide and love it. So, one of the things that you recommend to do is to request kids to do things instead of instructing them. How can we get them to do these things without yelling, without nagging? How do we do that?
I love that you honed in on that first part of like asking versus telling. Instead of giving a directive, it's we all deserve the same amount of respect no matter how old we are. And I would never tell anybody, that as an adult, I would never say, go get me that, or go clean your room, or anything, including like I have employees. I would never talk to them that way. And it's okay to have that same sort of respect for your kids to say, would you please do X, Y, and Z? Or I would love it if you could do X, Y, and Z before dinner time, or whatever. It is absolutely okay for you to speak to your kids respectfully that way. And it does not minimize the odds that they're going to comply with you. In fact, it increases those odds. But there's zero way for us to parent in a way that will guarantee our kids listen to us every single time or do what we want them to do every single time. And so even when you're asking nicely, they're still going to forget, they're still going to ignore you, they're still going to break the rules. That's definitely going to happen. And I think one of the things I do with my clients is take the work that's in that guide to a different level that's talking about the emotional things behind there. If we're approaching motherhood with this idea that like it's my job to get my kid to do whatever it is that I need them to do. They need to listen to me all the time. If they don't, I'm messing up. Like it's my mandate from the universe or from nature or whatever, as a mother, that I should be the one controlling what's going on in my family. We're already set up to feel like failures all the time because you cannot control anyone but yourself. And if you're going to feel like a failure every time you don't control your kid, you're going to feel like a failure a lot. So, getting that mindset in place is really important. And that's something that I think is a little bit maybe next level from the guide, because the guide is really just step by step exactly the parenting technique to use. And what I think a lot of us as parents have already learned is that if reading a book or taking a class or whatever were enough to make us the parents we wanted to be and feel the way we want to feel in parenthood, I wouldn't have a job. Like that's not enough. We know what we're quote unquote supposed to be doing, but we have a really hard time making it happen. And the reasons why are all those kind of mindset and emotional things that are going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, ladies, if you are watching this live and you have some questions, feel free to drop those in the comments. I feel like this is a very hot topic right now that people would have a lot of questions about with being stuck in the house for the past few months. I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are going through a lot of tension right
Yeah,
now. So,
absolutely. Yeah, I think we're all have a little bit of cabin fever.
yes, for sure. So, okay, one of the things you also recommended was putting a time limit on things. I am a huge control freak, and this was a very big struggle for me when I started this process of requesting and also putting a time limit on things. What's
Mhm.
some advice you would have for control freak moms like me who want it done and want it done now?
Right. So I feel like with the controlling thing, this is actually a topic I'm working on an email about. Is like, are you in control or are you just controlling? There's two
Right.
different things there, right? And when moms are feeling like they are a control freak, they really need to be in control of everything. Oftentimes, I find that there's really two things going on. One is this feeling of like, it's my responsibility. I have to be in charge. I want to be, that's what we really think of when we think about being controlling. But there's sometimes a second piece, which is like, I need to be doing all the time, or I have a whole story I'm telling myself about what it means for me to not be actively, proactively engaged in making something happen. And there's a lot of work sometimes that needs to be done there to recognize that stepping back and letting your child, screw up while you sit on your hands and bite your tongue actually is doing way more than you're intervening all the time in that process. Like there's a cognitive process that's happening for your child when they've been asked to do something, they have time to make it happen for themselves, they choose not to do that, or they forget or whatever, and a consequence happens. That whole cycle is an extremely important and really effective teaching process that our intervening with reminders and talking and just doing it for them and all the silly little things that we do as moms, it completely interrupts and negates that process. So our kid becomes less and less and less likely to ever learn to do things on their own or listen when we talk to them and all of that stuff. So sometimes I like to remind, speaking of reminders, remind my clients that the screwing up is what does the teaching. You actually want your kid to forget. You want your kid to make a mistake when the stakes are low, which is now in childhood, so that they can learn that like it's on me to pay attention to my surroundings. It's on me to make things happen for myself. And when I don't, I'm the one who bears the brunt of that. And when we can, for most people anyway, when we can remember that that's the whole point of this whole parenting process, is to create an environment in which our kid gets to screw up all the time and we just need to stay out of it, it becomes a little bit easier to be like, no, I'm actually being in control by not controlling this situation. I'm letting it unfold. I'm in control of myself. I am choosing to show up in this circumstance in a totally different way because I know that it's actually what's best for me and my kid and our relationship with each other and our family and all of those things.
Hmm.
So shifting your mindset of like staying out of it and not doing it or not intervening is actually being in control.
Man, that is so good. I love that. You're speaking right to me.
Great.
Definitely need it. Okay, so you talked about natural consequences. I think that was also a really big struggle for me, is because I'm like, okay, well, I'm used to spanking or putting in timeout. So how can we start to use our brain to really come up with those natural consequences for not doing what you're requested to do?
Mm-hmm. I love this question because I think oftentimes when moms are like, okay, I really want to start using natural consequences instead of this more like punitive approach. So, what consequences should I use? I want to give you permission that 9 times out of 10, the punishments that you're using now, not spanking, but things like timeout, for example, or whatever punishments that you're using right now, you can still be using that exact same thing. What makes it a consequence is the delivery, not what the actual thing is. So for example, when my clients work with me, our kids still wind up in their room. You know, they wind up in a timeout, so to speak. The difference is how they wind up in the timeout, how mom talks to them and what she says when kid is done in timeout, how long the kid is in timeout, what happens while the child is in timeout. That's what changes it from a punishment to a consequence. The same thing, like an example I get all the time is like, taking away screen time, right? That's like a punishment, universal. Moms use it all the time. And taking away screen time can be a great consequence too. What makes it what usually is happening in families when I first start working with them is, or in the screen time example, it's like, I've asked you 100 times, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. By the time I'm giving you this punishment, I am not calm anymore. I'm saying, you know what, that's it. I've had it up to here with you. Enough is enough. You are being naughty. You're disrespecting me. I'm angry. No screen time for you. You've lost screen time for a week and you deserve it. And, if the kid argues about it, it's like, let me explain again why you deserve this punishment. That is a punishment. The exact same outcome can be delivered as a consequence. If the first time the child does whatever it is that they are doing that merits losing screen time, you respond in a totally neutral affect with tons of empathy and hand that problem back to the child and say, well, it looks like screen time is causing a problem for you right now. So we'll be taking a break from that. We'll try it again when you're ready. The end. And doesn't need to be something that we talk about even any more than that. It doesn't need to be something that we get upset about when the kid doesn't like their consequence, all of that stuff. It's the delivery that makes it a consequence. Mm-hmm. Now, things like corporal punishment, spanking and stuff like that, I don't advocate, and there's no way to make that into a consequence. It will always be punitive. So if you're ready to move out of a punitive parenting approach into one that's a little bit more about consequences and empowerment and independence and stuff like that, it doesn't involve physical punishment at all, except for maybe picking your child up and placing them in their room or something like that.
Yeah. Awesome. So we had a situation with the teenager, speaking of teenagers, where, she was told we were leaving at a certain time and she didn't make it down when she was supposed to, despite 3 time warnings. And she didn't make it to the appointment. So I told her, okay, you have to walk to the appointment. It's only about a mile. It's not too far. She could have made it there in time. But she didn't. And I said, okay, well, the consequence is you don't get an eye exam and I'm not going to reschedule it for you. You just don't get one.
So, if that's what works for your family or whatever, that's fine. I would say like what makes it a consequence, like I said, is doing it in a way that's not angry, that does not have like intensity and emotion behind it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's multiple different ways that she can turn that around for herself. If she's like, Mom, I really do want to get glasses. I really need them. What can I do? You're not going to be like, never. When you leave this house, you can get glasses.
Right. Okay. I don't see any questions coming up on the comments. Tell me anything you want to add about teenagers, because I don't even know what to ask at this point.
I just find it's fascinating for me watching my teens go through adolescence, watching them, at least the pattern that I'm observing so far is like things are pretty okay until about 14 and a half, maybe 15. And then is when like the real bomb of hormones and emotions and intensity starts to really explode. And so watching the arc of like, things are a little rocky. Oh, now things are really crazy. And then watching them sort of move through that into a place where they're still teenagers. They still don't have great rational thinking and things like that, but they're starting to have a little bit more awareness. They can reflect on some of the crazy things that have happened and stuff like that. So if you have a teenager out there, I just want to first say it gets better. Not your forever place. This is not your kid's forever place. And something that when I started struggling with teens that I found really maddening when I was looking for resources and support was this kind of attitude of just like, you just got to get through this time. You just got to get them through it. You just got to get them through high school. You just got to get them to graduate. You just, it's like this thing that you're just like white knuckling it through. And that has never been my approach to parenting. I mean, we all can get into that place with our kids of just like making ourselves miserable in motherhood. And basically what we're doing is white knuckling it for 18 years until they leave. Mm-hmm. And so it really bothered me that a lot of the, it's fun. I guess in one sense you can look at adolescence as this thing that you need to survive as a mother, and your kid needs to survive too. But I find it much more useful anyway to kind of say, no, I want more than that. And especially because these are the last years we have with our kids for most of us. And then they're going to go off and live by themselves, and it's never going to be the same again. And I certainly don't want to spend the, golden years of my, home life with my child just in misery. So that's the second message I want to say is you don't just have to just wait for it to get better. There's things that you can do that make this a totally different flavor of time than just this awful obstacle. And then the last thing I'll say about that is, it was very fascinating to me to see how the same principles that apply to a toddler or a 9-year-old or whatever still apply in adolescence. What really is the challenge is that for us in our minds, it feels totally different because now we're not talking about not putting your shoes on in time to go to school. We're talking about doing drugs and you're studying to get your driver's license, and the stakes seem so much higher. The implications are higher too. It's not just the risks are higher, but also for mothers, I think especially, it's like, oh my gosh, I've done so much to get this kid to where he is, and I thought I was doing all of this stuff right as a mother, and this is who he's turned into, someone who would do drugs or someone who would lie or make these just terrible decisions and be reckless and things like that. It calls into question so much for us. We wind up getting sucked into our own mind drama, and we forget that like the principles are the same. You can't control anyone but yourself. Experiences are the best teacher, and that all human beings want choice and agency. Those three principles are what I apply to every single parenting technique I teach my clients, and they're the same no matter how old the child is. So don't get in the weeds. That's my third message is like, this is the same. It really is the same. It just feels different.
Yeah, it does, because they are old enough to know better, right?
Right, except
that's the main thing that goes through my head.
Yeah, I think those kinds of thoughts really don't serve us as moms very much, because what we're really saying is it should be this other way. There's something wrong here. Mm-hmm. And, what does that even mean to say they're old enough to know better? How do you know what age how do we know what age our kids need to be when they're going to learn this lesson? And, as a coach, when I hear a client say they're old enough to know better, my response is, well, that's clearly not the case because they don't know better. So they're not old enough to know better yet.
Yes.
And
so true.
Doesn't mean that they never will be. I mean, we could probably all talk about the crazy things we did when we were kids, and we all now are like, I would never behave that way. Or maybe if you'd seen me when I was a certain age, you would never think that I would turn into a responsible, loving member of society. But we do, we figure it out.
One last question. So I don't think that it's unique that my girls are room bound most of the day. I think that a lot of teenagers are like that. Do you have any tips for drawing them out and helping connect with them? Because I do want to connect with them, but it's like impossible to get them out of their rooms.
Right. So couple things. Having some rules about screens in bedrooms can help sometimes. So all of my work that I do with clients, I talk about 3 different areas: mindset, momming, and management. Management is like the rules and structure and stuff like that. So from a management perspective, having rules about screens in bedrooms can be helpful. Having actually things planned, like we're going to get a, you said you have daughters, like maybe we're going to get pedicures together. Like we have an appointment. You can't, no matter how much time you spend in your room the rest of the day, we're spending this hour together. It's happening. So actually having things planned together, making it a routine can be good. Also, so maybe like every day at 6 o'clock, you guys go for a walk or something like that. So having that's that management aspect. The mindset aspect is to ask yourself, like, well, how much of this is just me wishing it were different versus it actually being a bad the way that it is. So and there's no right answer to that, and there's probably a little bit of both going on there, where it's like, wait a second, a couple years ago you were like all over me like white on rice, and now I can't even get you to like say more than 2 words to me when I ask how your day was. So that feels wrong. It feels like, who are you? I don't even know this person anymore. Something, it's strange to see a person that you've lived with and known like your own self their whole lives all of a sudden be behaving differently. While alarm bells go off for us of like, this isn't, there's something wrong with this person. They're not themselves, except they're becoming themselves, and they need to do it in a little cocoon called their bedroom. So, ask yourself from that mindset piece, like, how much of this is me overreacting, or, kind of putting my own emotions and feelings about. To me, adolescence is a grieving process for a lot of moms, of like saying goodbye to this chapter of our lives in motherhood, saying goodbye to this person that we grew up with, because they're never going to be that person again. They're becoming something else. So how much of that is me and my grieving process and putting that as expectations on my kid, versus how much of this is like, actually, like, no, really, we need to see you a little bit more, and it's not healthy what's going on. So that's that mindset piece. And then the momming piece is consequences, consequences, and consequences. So if you've set an expectation, be clear with your kid. If you have, especially with a teenager, if you have a conversation with them that's like, I really would love to see you more, and you spend a lot of time in your room, an adult would have that conversation with you and be like, okay, I'm going to be more mindful about that, and I'm going to try to really make an effort here and stuff like that. But that is a very vague conversation for a teenager. We need to be specific in like, I expect that you will join us for dinner and that you will hang out for an hour after dinner is over. And when that doesn't happen, there will be a consequence for that. Or, be clear with your expectations. What seems like a lot, things like a lot or hardly ever, or you never do this or that, it's very nebulous. What it means to you is probably something that it doesn't mean to your kid at all. I had a conversation with my 13-year-old where I was like, I only see you when you want food, and I'm happy to make you food. I love it, but I feel that you really are not, showing up in this relationship. You're just using me. And, I had that conversation the first time in a not effective way. And then the second time I was like, this is what I really want from you. And I think it's reasonable for me to expect that. And he responded much better when I was very specific. In fact, he knows now that he cannot leave the room until everybody is done with dinner. So he's 13 years old. He inhales his dinner, and then he knows he will not leave the room. You can tell he really wants to, but he won't do it. So it's because I was like, this is now I had to be really clear.
Yeah. We have rules about that too. Like when you're eating dinner, everyone stays at the table until everyone's done. You can't just shove it in and leave.
Yeah, you shove it in if you want to. You're sitting there for just as long as the slow coke.
Yes. Awesome. Well, Anne, thank you so much for being here today. Could you tell us a little bit about who you work with, what you do, who your ideal customer is, and how they can find you?
So like I said, I feel very confident that I can support pretty much any mother. So whatever age your kid is, doesn't matter. I've got something for you. And it's really about supporting moms who want help getting not just their kids' behavior on track, but just feeling good and centered and satisfied in motherhood. Not only motherhood, you probably have other things too, but you know, having this feeling of, you know, this alignment is like what I like to say, just feeling like you're where you need to be in motherhood and your family is where they need to be. And the best place to, if you want to get this free guide that we've been talking about, the best place to get that is to go to bit.ly/mama guide. And you can get that there. If you want to just find out about my practice and book a free consult with me and do a discovery call and get my eyes on your family and get my feedback about it, you can set that up and find out about it at my website, which is mommeexperience.com. So it's like mommy, but it's spelled M-E, because the whole point is about healing mothers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you coming and talking with us about how to have a better experience as a mom.
Thank you, Misty. I really had a great time. I love talking about this stuff.
Yes. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.